I remember I had a fighter that I was working with who was a Muay Thai athlete, and she had a lot of issues, and I started looking at her breathing, and she could not let go of her abdominals. Like she couldn't physically. I would like put my hands there and be like, relax this, relax this. Like she had no ability to do that because she was just hyper tense from years of kickboxing, years of keeping it tight so that she looks sexy, like all of those elements. And it took a lot for her, like to your point of like, you're scared. You're scared, not in the way you think you're scared, but like your nervous system. And we're never gonna take a step forward until you can get your nervous system to relax.
Because they already have so much going against them, and then you're adding another stressor, and people are like, I could take more pain. I'm like, you're not even breathing now. Why would I add more pressure? I'm like, calm down. And there's so much resistance to it too, because it's uncomfortable. Like I say, I'm rewiring your brain. You're not gonna like me, because people get angry and they're like, this is stupid. Why should I do this? And I'm like, you're so lazy and sloppy that I'm like teaching you, and it's requiring that much thought to do things in a neutral position. I'm like, but you golf all day and you're lifting this and lifting that. I'm like, what do you think is lifting it then? If you can't even coordinate your body weight in a neutral position and static position, they're like, I don't know. I'm like, your joints. And so it's you know, being good at what you know so that you can get that message through. And it's hard with ego, especially with pro athletes.
It is.
Navigate that.
That's where the psychology comes in. Like that's where I try to take the ownership of, okay, how can I shift this message? The most important thing isn't my ego here. It's like, how can I get this person to understand that the thing that we're trying to do is going to help them, and how can I shift my approach to ultimately this is where we need to be. I don't care how we get there.
Exactly.
So I can let go of my ego and say, hey, honestly, it doesn't even have to be my way.
Right.
You know, when you work in that like high performance team and you have nutrition specialists and all these people working together, I'm like, I'm okay to take a back seat as long as we're all moving together.
Yes.
So if I did this a lot with fighters, because you have every coach, as you know, none of them are working together.
No.
You've got 6 different sport coaches and all these different people, and they're actually competing against each other because they're all ego.
Yes.
So for me, I'd always come in and be like, hey, how can I help? And let me take away one of my sessions so that you can have more intensity in your session, and so that you see that the ultimate goal is like this athlete needs to make it to the fight as healthy and optimal in his performance as possible, not he has to do my strength and conditioning program and everything has to be the way I planned it. But that's a hard thing, but it's a great way to build trust, because then athletes see really quickly, like, it's not about me.
Exactly.
It's about you.
And I speak about this all the time with other coaches. I'm like, there's not a lot of us. Even though it seems like it because everyone's here, I'm like, there's not a lot of us. So, because I have trainers in LA, like we were talking earlier about just LA in general, there's a lot of ego. And I never step on anyone to get ahead. And so I have some trainers that talk bad about other trainers, and I'm like, guys, we already have a small team. Like, let's all be on the same team. It doesn't matter. And if that person if the athlete thinks that, you know, their one coach is helping them more, placebo effect, it is gonna help them more. So let them go. And like you said, it builds trust. Trust, I call it my little safe place, because you know when you release these tensions and things, there's emotion stored in that. So I've had people full blown cry, like grown men are like, what the hell are you doing to me? And I'm like, we're just releasing things because you're able to breathe. So it's unique to see what happens to the human body in a hyper stress environment, but also when they find that safe place, and what can happen to someone's life when they release all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, it's funny because I feel like we're just having a conversation, because I'm like, I'm interested to know this, because I wasn't always good at communicating, and I would see myself say something and I'm like, that's what you got from what I said? Like, I hear the person and like I see their reaction to me, because people assume things about you. You never know how you rub someone. So I'm like, I can't believe that's what you got. So I'm like, I must be saying things wrong. So I actually took Brett's course on communication, and I tried to study. I read so many different books on human psychology, and it changed my life, because again, you can know everything, but if you can't translate it, it doesn't mean anything. So tell me a little bit about when you started to discover. I know you studied psychology, but as far as in the sports performance world, you know, especially with pro athletes, they have some guy that knows this or knows this guy that's a specialist, and they're doing it better. So how do you get beyond that? Like, besides what you said about building that trust, but the ego part of it, when did you know the importance of the psychology, and how did you try to design a philosophy that helped you communicate better?
I think I really started to understand the importance of psychology when I started realizing how few people were doing it. It was just an assumption because it was a passion of mine. Behavioral psychology was just, why do people do the things they do? What makes them make these decisions, and how do you change motivations? That was always really interesting to me. And it obviously tied well with what I did for a living. And then I started getting in the art of communication as well. Like that was something that I always thought, I was like, I'm saying this and you're clearly not getting that.
Yes.
And I could just beat my head against the wall and like say, this is how I work, and athletes either learn to adapt to me. But I think I learned quickly from mentors that like your job as a coach is to adapt to different athletes and different people and help them be successful. That's what a coach is. It's not the athlete's job to adapt to your coaching style. And because of that, I started exploring a lot of how I changed the way I communicate. And I was also put in a leadership position really early in my career. And that forced me into, I don't know a lot about this. And I had some people that were leaders in my career that weren't great, that I think really mistreated me as an employee and just weren't the leader I was looking for. And I was just this hungry, curious young person who was like, teach me anything you like. I'll hang out here all day long if you just show me the things that you do. I really want to learn. And unfortunately, I didn't really find that. So when I got put into a management position, I was like, I'm going to be that person that I never had. So I started studying leadership and communication and management. And then I started seeing that this is all we do. This is how we interact with our athletes. This is how we interact with our employees, with all the people, building trust, being able to communicate, being able to adapt and help them to see the path forward, and understanding that it's not about me. So I was fortunate to do that. And as I started kind of developing that for myself, when I was in management, I had to start teaching it to other coaches. And once I started communicating the things that just were in my head, I realized that people are like, what are you talking about? I was like, wait, what do you mean you guys don't study this stuff? You don't read about motor learning and language and the way that the words that we use and how that impacts what people hear and
even
what
how you
they
learn
do.
a skill, the levels of learning a skill, how our nervous system processes
Exactly.
skills and masters skills.
It was mind-blowing to me that I was interacting with people that were coming to our facility that had just graduated with a master's in kinesiology, and on paper they were more educated and experienced than I was. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to teach these people anything, but they're working here, they're doing our internship, so I'll start sharing what I think I know. And all of a sudden, I was realizing that so many of these people just had never even heard of that approach. So that's when I started doubling down on, I need to understand this better, and more coaches need to understand it, because I'm seeing now what's making me more effective than these other people, which is why I got put in this leadership position in the first place. Because my boss literally said, you're the performance director, we got 2 new coaches, we had no system to teach them. He was just like, teach them how you train athletes. I was like, I don't know. I've never really thought about that. So I was like, this is what I do in a speed thing. And here's kind of the decisions tree I go through. If he can't do this, then we go to this. And if he can do this, we move to this. And that was 2011.
It's hard though, isn't it?
It was very difficult.
You start to like question, it's just like breathing. When you start thinking about your breath, you're like, I can't breathe anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do I even do? It's so natural to you, I guarantee, that you just do it. And then when someone's like, well, what do you do? You're like, what do you mean? The stuff that I do, I don't know. And now putting it on paper, I'm doing the same thing where it's hard. It's a whole
And that's
skill.
what I started doing. I just started writing it down.
Yeah.
And that's actually what moved me into what I do now, because I started, okay, I need to be able to communicate this to these new trainers. I've been doing this now for 6 years. These guys haven't done it at all. They're just coming out of college. How do I help them understand what I've learned in the 6 years? So I started trying to build that into an internship system and all these systems, and that's how my whole career shifted into what I do now. I started getting into teaching seminars and building education curriculums and that's why I left and started building my own company that was geared towards education, and then ended up with XPT, and that was exactly same thing. It was, we do all this amazing stuff. How do we teach it to people? Right. And I was like, well, that's exactly what I did for myself 7 years ago, and through that the last 7 years, so I can probably do that again for you guys. The more I start to dig in and I build that framework.
It's invaluable.
Yeah, and the nice part is that's how you can scale things and have a bigger impact.
Exactly.
Right? You can expedite everybody else. We can get a trainer, hopefully, who's got 5 years of experience and get them thinking and training at the level of someone with 10 or 15 years of experience. Right. By being more intentional.
Right.